So, Jarvis, how did you remember that the client wanted to buy a new truck after they came back from visiting their daughter in Italy who had their third grandchild? Hey, everybody. Before we start this episode, a quick shout out to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Perfect RIA. How could it not be brought to you by the Perfect RIA? But if you enjoy these episodes, if you think that Micah and I, or at least Micah, have some great advice to give, head over to our website, theperfectria.com, and download one of our free guides towards making your practice better. So it's not just the things you hear on the podcast, it's the things that you implement. And if you're saying, you know what I'd really like to get in a room with Matt and Micah. I'd really like to ask them my own questions. I'd like to be coached by them. Then send an email to lifestyle@theperfectria.com, and one of our great team members will reach out to you and tell you more about the program.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Micah Shalansky, and with me, as usual, the legendary Matthew Jarvis. What's going on, bud?
Micah, I am living the dream. It is always so much fun to do these podcasts, I think for two reasons. One is it's really fun to spread the word and to help other advisors. We've now reached hundreds of thousands of advisors around the world. I was recently in London speaking to a group of advisors. And so this is really having an impact. We're seeing the entire industry shift. But I have to confess that selfishly, even to this point, even with all these downloads, I still kind of just view it as you and I sitting here talking about our practices every Monday morning as we record these things. And it's great. We really get to reflect. And someday we'll record the pre-roll. Probably not, but
probably not.
It's like you and I are jamming away. We're like, man, you do this and you're practicing this and we're doing this thing. And it's like we're so fired up for what we do because it's such a great thing that we do.
Jarvis, it makes a difference, right?
Yes.
And it's so easy to like, oh, well, the client has a question, or right, you get some negative head trash inside of there, right? But it says, no, they have a question about their finances. They have a question because you're holding all of their money, right?
Yes.
You are the one to make sure they don't run out of money in retirement. So their questions are really important. Why we do things and test what works and what doesn't work isn't because we're trying to bring on another client. It's so that we can always be delivering the next level of value to our clients. Because the more value we can deliver, the more people we get to help. The more people we get out, they can have this ideal lifestyle, which is fantastic. There's so many things we can't control, but there's a handful that we can dramatically influence. And that's where we got to be focused at. And it's just not in front client meetings, prospecting, etc. It's behind the scenes as well. It's everything you're doing pre and post these meetings are super important to make it successful.
It really is, right? And again, we're solving for building that relationship capital that we're going to have to get clients to avoid making the big mistakes, right? Whether that's,
right,
hey, I want to put everything in cryptocurrency, or it's I want to move to gold or cash or sell or whatever the case may be. It is that relationship capital we've built that will keep them on the straight and narrow. And I remember years ago, Nick Murray had posed this question because he was talking about how our role as an advisor, a financial advisor, is the single most important person in the client's entire professional life, far more than any doctor. And he says, I'll prove this to you. He says, go to any of your retired clients and ask them if by the morrow they had to either be dead or ask their children for money because they had run out. Every client will respond with, I don't need until the morning. Kill me now. Right now, it's a bit hyperbolous, but again, if you go to a client and say, hey, would you rather run out of money or run out of life? They're going to take run out of life, right? These people have saved their entire life to never be financially dependent on somebody else. Our role, I just can't overstress how important our job is as an advisor. And to your point, Micah, the way that we do our job best is by knowing these clients and being more interested in their success than anyone in their entire life.
Did you ever say this is really important too? And this also gets into a little parenting advice, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that people may make the mistake in is saying they don't want to be dependent on their children. I'm telling my kids from a young age, I get you the first 18 years through your life and I want 18 on the back end. That's the way this works. So I'm just trying to set different expectations with my kids.
I'm with you as well. I feel like they owe me quite a bit. My daughter once asked me if I would send her to a private school. And I said, I'll lend you the money for that. She said, what do you mean? She was like 8 at the time. She says, what do you mean you lend me the money? I said, what good does it do me if you go to a private school? I don't care. I'll lend you the money. You can pay me back down the road. But there's some family dynamic issues there. But that's kind of aside. Yeah.
We won't do the parenting podcast just yet. So back to the financial advisor side of it, right? But no, I 100% agree, right? All of these things matter dramatically. And I like what you said about the relationship capital. I recently had an advisor pushing back on me and says, Micah, you guys keep way too much money on the sidelines, right? We have roughly 1 to 2 years in cash and about 3 years in some type of fixed income instrument. So 5 years on the sidelines. And there's pushing back on me pretty serious about saying, if I really think the market's going up, I shouldn't have 5 years. I should have 3 years or 18 months and whatnot. So, we could get on to all the analytics as to why, but that doesn't matter. right? The technical detail here doesn't. This is an emotional question. Why do I like to keep this much money on the sidelines? Is that not if, but when the stock market is down, clients drawing from a pool of cash allows them to stay invested. Otherwise, they have an emotional freak out because everything's dropping in value. They sell everything out. Now the client's really hurt, right? If I have a little drag on the portfolio because of how much cash I hold, but it keeps the client invested, that is better than the alternative being 100% invested sometimes and 100% in cash all the other times because the client is freaking out, right? So our job, all of these relationship capital points, everything counts. Everything helps in these situations or hurts.
Yeah, it really does. And so let's talk about kind of what are the two most important parts of your client meeting, right? So we've talked at great length about surge, we've talked about value adds, but the client meeting itself, whether that's Zoom or in person, there are really some critical spots. But Micah, you've got something here. I can tell, I can see it in your eyes.
We better be on the same page with this one, all right? The most important part, like what you need to jump into right away is performance.
Being on time. Oh, wait. So we really missed this one, Micah. We got to rehearse these better.
Yes. All right. None of that crap actually matters, right? So Jarvis, what is the most important thing that when you're walking into a client meeting that you really need to, and I'm going to say it's just not important enough to pay attention to, you got to practice and rehearse the hell out of this.
You really do. And I'm not even sure one word to articulate it, but really you've got to draw out from them what is most important to them, what is most pressing to them. So I'm going to always start with a little bit of small talk. This is not me sharing my life stories, right? This is me. I want to draw out. Now, how do I know what to ask? Because my dictation, which we'll talk about at the end of this episode, my dictation tells me everything we talked about in the last meeting, their concerns, their passions, what they're interested in, their dog's name, whatever the case may be. That lets me then show them, I'm demonstrating right away, I remember what we talked about last time. You are important to me, more important to me than anyone else in your life. And I'm demonstrating that, right? I'm saying, hey, listen, how was your trip to Italy? Matthew, that was a year ago. I know, but I haven't heard about it yet. Oh, it was great. Did you buy those first class seats like you said you were going to? You know what? I did, and it was totally worth it, right? Versus they walk into the doctor's probably not even looking at the right chart, right? They're like, oh, no, Mr. Jones? No, it's Jarvis. Oh, yeah. So how's that, how's the diabetes going? No diabetes here, yeah. Everywhere else in the world, they're getting this subpar take a number advice.
Yeah, it's really important, right, to know those things and to actually care. Now, the reason that the practice comes in so much in with this, I don't want to be thinking in the meeting, crap, what should I ask them about, right? I want to be present in the meeting. And so the way that I'm present for it is I know what I'm going to ask. I know what questions are going to be there. And sometimes things come up that are completely off script that we got to talk about and address, but most of the time I'm really prepared for that. So that opening chit chat, right? Jarvis, one of the questions I love to ask, I love your comment about always following up on other things, but I'd love to ask, hey, what's new and exciting in your life, right? Because maybe there's some things they hadn't told me about that have come up. Or I bought a new car, Micah, right? Okay, that probably would have come up in cash flow, but that's exciting for them. Fantastic. Oh, we just booked this other trip. We have this thing going on. Our daughter's getting married, right? What are the other things that are exciting in their life? Because the money's just a tool to facilitate those things they want to do. And I want to talk about those things because it matters when I'm backing into the money side as well.
Now, this is really where we separate the pros from everyone else. And you might have missed it in Micah's question there. He didn't say, is there anything new and exciting, right? That's a solid question to ask, but it's too easy to say, there's nothing exciting. But when I say, hey, what is new and exciting in your life? And then I pause and I just give it space to breathe. They're going to come up with something. Even if they say, there's not really anything new and exciting. That's okay. I've listened to that as well. Same with when we get through chit chat, I say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, I've got several things I want to look at with you today. But before we start on any of those, please tell me what questions or concerns are on your mind. So I've leaned forward when I'm asking that question, and then I'm leaning back to really listen, not like slouching back in my chair, but I'm moving backwards visibly to say, hey, this space is yours. And sometimes, Mike, I'm curious if you have this, clients will say, well, I've got a couple things, but let's start on your list first. And I say, yeah, I really appreciate your kindness there. But I was always taught that ladies go first, or that the gentlemen go first, whatever the case may be. I'll just make some kind of clever comment right there and then let them go. I really would like to. I insist. You go first.
Jarvis, I really appreciate that. But your questions are really, really important to me. And I want to know what those are to make sure that we address them. So is it okay if we just write down what those questions are so we can make sure that we get to them? And then that way it's not saying like for me, this works well for me. So it's your own script. So it's an easier yes for me to get. They'll tell me what the questions are. And then after I get their questions, I'm going to weave their questions into the agenda. Well, a couple things before the questions. They're going to tell me their question. Then the same with you. I say, oh, all right, question about buying a new car, blah, blah, blah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
What else? And they're going to tell me,
Yes.
great. What else? Well, nothing else. Okay, well, perfect. You know, Jarvis, one of the things you know is that I'm really good about getting back on script. Never be worried about interrupting me at any time. I'm delighted to hear what your questions are. So if something else pops into your mind, make sure you go ahead and ask. Or if they say, well, Micah, I think it's all the questions, but I might have one later. Then my line is, sorry, Jarvis, now is the only time you get to ask questions. And then they laugh just like that.
Yep.
I'm like, not a problem. Just let me know what they are. But I want to make sure I'm giving time to their questions. I'm writing them down and then I'm repeating their questions to them the way they said them. I am not correcting those questions yet. Micah, I got this qualified charitable distribution I got to take every year. So, you know, how does that work? Oh, okay. Question on your qualified charitable distribution or demanding distribution or whatever they're going to misphrase it. I'm going to say it back the exact same way. And then later we can talk about how that's going to fit in the plan.
Boy, there's so many things to draw out there, right? Because that's emphasizing that I heard them. I didn't assign meaning to what they said, but I also want to draw out, Micah, that what else? That takes courage to use as an advisor. Oh, yes, and if you're thinking to yourself right now, it doesn't take, it's just 2 words. You've never used it. You've never used it. I first learned that from a CPA that I work with, and she would ask it 3 times. And it was real uncomfortable. And Michael, let's use some examples of things that have come out. I've used that on the second or third what else. And suddenly the room got really quiet, right? And so I'm like, all right, let me give this thing space. And the client's really pondering. And then the client says, you know, Matthew, I wasn't going to tell you this, but I just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Okay. So, you know, on the one hand, we could say like, hey, why didn't she tell me this? That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. She was holding that confidential. And then it was the third what else when she said, actually, I feel like I really need to tell you this. She hadn't told anyone, not her kids. She hadn't planned to, by the way, either, because she just wanted to keep, that was her choice. Well, that has impacts on our planning, right? And it was the third what else that brought that out. Sometimes there's funner things though too, Micah, right? Sometimes the third what else is, you know what, I've really been thinking about buying a new truck, but I'm just not sure that's what Dave Ramsey would recommend. I had a client say this, and I had just actually been in Dave Ramsey's truck the week before, your brand new Ford truck. I said, great news. I'm so glad you were there. I just was in Dave Ramsey's brand new truck. Thing is spotless. It has like 10 miles on it. He's not going to care, right?
Correct, because he flew to get the truck. Wait, no, somebody else picked up the truck for him in his private jet, and then he went to it. So I do think it's okay.
Yeah, but you got it. That what else? It's like so many things we do, Micah. It seems easy until you're looking a client in the eye and you're trying to do it.
Yeah, and so after you've done that, you've asked those what else questions, and you have it done, and you got that basis done, then I love to take their questions and weave it into the agenda, right? There's some questions that we should just tackle right off the bat, but there's other questions that says, you know what, I want to talk about some other things first and seeing how this is. Let's say a client is pretty high in their distribution, right? They're taking like 5+% in the distributions. They're like, hey, I want to pull 100 grand out, you know, or 200 grand out to go put a down payment on another property. Because that happened last week. Now they're getting that. So it's okay, great, right? I don't want to jump right into the property information or what 200 grand is or what the taxes are, et cetera. I want to have a guided discovery with this. This is, you know what? That's a great question. I think talking about that $200,000 withdrawal for down payment, I think that really fits well into cash flow. I'd love to go through cash flow first. Let's see how it all fits together. Then talk about our investments, because you're talking about buying an investment property. Let's see how it fits in the whole nest with our investments and what the best way is to do that. Is that going to be okay if we address it then? And it's a very serious question I'm asking, right? They're, you know, I want to make sure they're on the same page, but I need to give them a why am I punting their question. Sometimes we got to answer it right away. Other times we got to punt it to put more information in front of it, but I don't want to feel like I'm neglecting their questions.
I got to confess, sometimes I'm punting it because I just need some time for my brain to noodle on it, right? Let's use your example of, hey, I want to pull out $250,000 to buy another piece of property. My immediate reaction to them is going to be, wow, that sounds really exciting. And so I'm jotting that out, $250,000 to buy a piece of property. Tell me a little bit more about that. Okay, back to Micah, back to your point. Let's talk about this when we talk about cash flow. It gives my subconscious some time to work on that. And it also lets me look for some data points that I need. How much is in the cash bucket? How close are they on their guardrails? As we're going through, I'm seeing all these other things. I'm looking at what are their life-to-date distributions, right? So the pieces are coming together for me. It saves me from never being on the spot. Now, it may be, Micah, that we get to that point in the discussion and I still don't have enough information to give them an answer, which is great. And I can say, great news, Mr. and Mrs. Client. I could give you a back of the napkin answer on this thing, but I want to do some more analysis. Is it okay if I dig in a little bit deeper with my team? I'll get back to you on Thursday with that answer. Is that okay with you? And they're going to say, well, of course. But again, to your point, Mike, I've heard them. I've honored their question. Because that's really all that exists in the meeting. All that exists in the meeting is what the client wants to talk about. Can we provide some guidance on top of that? Sure. But what exists is what they want to talk about. We honor that or we fail the meeting.
I totally agree. Jarrison, one thing I want to add to
please.
kind of what you said, and I know you don't do this, but don't punt something just for the sake of punting something, right? That doesn't add value, right? So it's one of those things you really have to be able to look at. And this is the reason you have to practice everything. If I'm worried about what I'm going to say next, I'm not listening to what the client says. If I have all the value adds I'm going to deliver in that meeting rehearsed so well, I could be woken up in the middle of the night, dead sleep, and be able to run through this value add. I can pay full attention to what's going on. And I got a lot of brain cycles that I get to use, right? Thinking about their problem when I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next. So again, that's where practice comes in. But one of the things in being effective with your time, don't create more work for you. If this is something you can address in that client meeting, go through and address it in that client meeting.
Yeah, some things are an easy layup, right? So sometimes clients will come in, they'll say, oh yeah, we did take a big distribution. Okay, cool, a big distribution. We get to that point, tell me a little bit more about this. Well, we need to pull out $4,000. Okay, so in my mind, I'm thinking that's not a big distribution. Great news, we can take care of that. Again, to your point, Micah, great news, we can take care of that. And I'm writing down, and we're gonna talk about dictations in a minute. I'm writing down $4,000. Is that before taxes or after taxes? In other words, is that how much you'd like to have in your hand or how much you'd like taken from your account? Oh, that's how much I need it in my hand. Okay, perfect. Can we send that to the bank where we send things already? Yes, you can. Okay, can we take care of that by next week? Is that okay or is this more urgent? Next week's fine. And I'm writing all of this down so that, again, the client is seeing, I'm not just throwing it in my mind. You know, sometimes the server comes, takes everyone's orders, writes nothing down. I'm like,
I don't know what you're going to get. It's a mystery.
Maybe you're good at this, maybe you're not, right? I'm writing it down. I'm making sure we're all on the same page. To your point, Mike, I don't want to create some weird work for myself later, like follow up and say, was that gross or net?
Well, on that note, if you guys are watching us online, you might see my lights kind of flickering a little bit. We got a little bit of a snowstorm going on in Alaska. So just kind of flicker. I know, it's weird, like snow in Alaska. It's weird. So, but one of the things that's important is I got battery backups because I wanted to make sure that when it flickers, we can still be up and running. And the way I got that was I delegated it to my assistant. And I was like, you know what? I need some things figured out. I went ahead and delegated to my assistant, and that works out really well. So if you're looking for a good assistant, then stay tuned and listen to our sponsors.
Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Belay. You know, the best part of having a virtual assistant from Belay is not the things that they get done that you were already going to do. That is valuable, by the way. It's that list of things that, if we're being honest, you need to get to and you're just never going to get it done. Like that doctor's appointment you keep meaning to schedule, or the contractor you need to find for your house to fix that leaky thing, or the flowers you keep meaning to send to your wife. Those are all things that you can give your Belay virtual assistant so that they get done, because we know that, if we're being honest, they're probably not going to get done. Now, how are they going to get done? Because Belay finds virtual assistants, including my own virtual assistant, who are masters at working down task lists. They're masters at taking one step ahead of what you're already thinking, right? Reach out to Belay, text the letters RIA to 55123 to get a free copy of their ebook. More importantly, to get introduced to my good friend Teresa, who's going to see if you're a good fit for a virtual assistant. Not everyone is. And then find a virtual assistant who's perfectly matched to your needs. So text the letters RIA to 55123. And now back to the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back, and especially thanks to our sponsors for keeping this show really exciting for all of you. So let's say, Micah, you've asked these great questions. You've gone through your value adds. You've gone through the agenda. You have made sure the client didn't have any more questions. You walk them all the way to the front door. What happens now, which I think is the second most important part of the meeting?
Amen. This is so critical to do, right? I'm like rolling up my sleeves, like excited to work there. All right, so there's a couple of really exciting things that you got to do, right? This is where your notes, your dictation is so critical to success. Immediately following the meeting, if I have another advisor in there, I might debrief with them real quick to make sure we're on the same page with dictation. So that's going to happen. Then immediately I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to do dictation. I do not worry about my time and how long dictation takes or how quick it is. I focus on, am I communicating everything I need to do in that meeting? What is that? I need to communicate a little bit like what's going on in the meeting. I need to be able to communicate to my team what needs to happen from the meeting. And I need to tell my future self what I need to be thinking about at our next meeting, right? Those are the three main things I'm focused on in my dictation. What's happening? How do I engage my team in order for them to get tasks and actions done, et cetera? And what do I got to tell future Micah to be ready for the next meeting the most efficient as possible? Now, there's something you got to do after dictation as well. We're going to talk about that in a second. But those are the main things that I'm going to do, Jarvis.
Yeah, Mike, and I think this is where a lot of advisors, they miss how we're able to do surge so effectively. It's because we're constantly giving ourselves a layup for the next thing, right? So when I'm in that meeting, right, Micah, you mentioned that. The client says, I got this question. I'm writing it down. How does that help me? Well, when I go to do my dictations, I've got all of my written notes right there, right? So I've made my dictations easier. And then to your point, when I'm doing my dictation, I'm saying, hey, I need to lay this up for my team and I need to lay this up for me in the next meeting so that when I only have 5 or 10 minutes to prep for that meeting, I've already kept this ball rolling versus starting from scratch every time. There's no way you could do surge, I think, if you were starting from scratch every single time with every meeting. It'd be too much.
Oh my gosh, it'd be a nightmare, right? Okay, so I want to talk about what was the meeting like. So, hey, I had a meeting with Bob and Sue. They came into the office today. They were virtual. I phone conference Sue in, right? I want to see what actually happened in that meeting. Was it a good meeting? Sue was a little disgruntled. She's having some employer issues at work. They didn't do blah, 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 right? I want to capture those things that are happening in the meeting. Then I want to talk into other things. I like to get the business stuff out of the way first before the personal. It's the way my brain works.
Okay.
So I'm going to start running through a lot of the business side of the equation, right? What are the things we talked about in the meeting? How is the cash flow? How is their investments? What do we do for tax planning? Do we estate planning value add, right? What were the main things that we did? What other questions did they have? And what actions came out of there? My action items, my dictation will always say action item 2, ops, operation, right? Wherever it's going to, advisor, wherever it's going to go, action item 2. And then we have a standard due date in our office. It's Wednesday of next week. Wednesday of next week is when all the tasks are due. They can be done sooner, but that's the deadline. If it is a different deadline than Wednesday of next week, that's when I'm going to articulate it in dictation and probably independently of dictation, reach out to the team and let them know there's a high priority task that needs to get done just so they see it and it's on their radar. Now, Jarvis, the way we grade dictation in our office, because we grade it, is a couple of ways. Number one, does the team come back to me and have to ask me for clarification on my tasks? Hey, action to ops, we got to do a Roth conversion on the clients. Let's make sure we go ahead and take care of that. Okay, so that is a task. Did that give the team enough information to answer the question? No.
Dozens of variables missing.
Yeah, okay, which client are we doing it on? Is it Bob or Sue? Does it matter, right? If they have multiple IRAs, are we moving anything over? Are there taxes? Are we moving over shares? Are we moving over cash? How are we making the tax payments? How much of a conversion to do? What things do we got to consider when making the conversion? Jarvis, on the layup side of it, I was like, action sequence to ops. We want to do a $50,000 conversion from Bob's account. We're going to have an estimated tax payment made from his joint account, action sequence to Kelly to make sure we communicate with him and make that tax payment. I want to keep them under the Medicare IRMA threshold so we don't cross them over. This should leave us about $10,000 of room, et cetera, right? Now, when I get to pick that dictation up, Kelly gets to see it in our operations. She goes, Micah wants to make sure they're keeping under IRMA. Now, she can use her brain when she's meeting with a client. If she sees anything off, she could be like, whoa, Micah, this will put him at 210, not 206, right? We're going to have a problem with this. So she gets to think about these things, which are important. And it's going to set them up where they can effectively communicate everything they need to with the client. When she calls the client on the Roth conversion or paperwork or anything that's needed, she'll be, oh, great news. Yeah, Micah had mentioned he wants to make sure he keeps you under the IRMA bracket. She's aware of these things to empower her to successfully complete it with the task and deliver value to the client. Sorry, it's a bit of a tirade there.
No, you're spot on, right? Because current Micah has all of those things top of mind, right? You were just in the meeting, you have all those numbers. Future Micah or future ops team is not going to have that, right? So my brain is already spun up, right? That program's already running. Let's go ahead and get that all out. Mike, a couple other important things with dictation. You mentioned describing the tone of the meeting, which is great, but I'm always going to have a positive spin on almost everything, right? I'm never going to say in the dictation, hey, Bob and Sue came in. They're really, what a bunch of jerks. I might say, hey, Bob and Sue came in. They had some real good questions or concerns about how their fee schedule worked. And so we really want to be proactive on communicating this with them. Or they're really having a struggle with this, that, or the other, right? But I'm relaying this to the team. Like, this is the team's only insight into that meeting. They don't know what happens behind that door. So I'm always going to have a positive tone on that, especially with prospect meetings. And then I want to call it again, Micah, you mentioned calling out action items. The action items cannot be buried in the like, we do this Roth conversion, No, it has to be action item X. This by this date with these variables, action item Y. And this goes to your scoring. If the team has to come back to me, I, as the person who recorded the dictation, made a mistake.
100%, right? Yeah. And then I also want to put inside of there what I'm going to be covering in the next meeting. What does future Micah need to know, right? So, hey, remember the client is retiring at the end of 2024. Next meeting, I want to review the retirement income timeline, go over the cash and the gap and how we're going to solve that when the client does retire because OPM is going to be delayed in their payments. Keep in mind, blah, 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 right? There's special provisions. This is when the pension kicks in. We're going to file for Medicare next year, right? Any of those things that I need to be planning for on the next meeting, I'm doing two things. Number one, I'm saying it in dictation what needs to happen. And number two, when I get done with dictation, I'm doing those things. I am doing 100% of whatever I can do. So if there's an action out there for a tax projection, but let's say a client hasn't uploaded a leave an earning statement or a pay statement or something to make it a little bit more final that I want to get, I have two choices. Well, I have a couple choices here. I could wait till the client gets me all of the information 1, 2, 3 weeks later, whenever that's going to come. And then I could go back and I could fully do the tax projection all at once. That is one option. That's 2 weeks later, which is 65 appointments later, right? I am not going to remember all of the details like I remember it right now. It's going to take me longer. Or what I could do is I could log on, I could put in all of the details that I have today and leave myself a note. Hey, this is 100% good to go minus the updated tax payment or minus the updated LAS. This is what we need to get, etc. Now, when future Micah picks this up, I can read my note and I trust my former self. And I go, great, this is all I got to put in and taxes are done. It can save you so much time if you do everything today, now, get it done before you leave.
Like another interesting thing comes to mind here with these dictations, which is, like you said, you're doing 25, 40, whatever meetings that are happening. It lets me also then put that meeting out of my mind. So if I met with the clients, happened to us during their first week of Surge. My very first meeting, first day of Surge, 9 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, be with that client. On Thursday, a question comes up from the team about that client. And I said, pull up the memo, pull the dictation, because I have no idea what happened. I've completely put that from my mind, which I have to do. If I have 24 meetings floating around in my mind, I will go insane. I will not be able to do it. I get a meeting, my prep is there. I trust former Jarvis, and I know that I'm trustworthy for future Jarvis, right? And that's how that works. That's how we're able to do that so efficiently. Is again, I've got these layups in place. I can be in the meeting. I can do everything I need to do. Then I can switch gears and completely move away from that because I know it's taken care of.
Jarvis, I know this is slightly off topic, but it also goes into meeting prep, right? When I do my meeting prep, I print out my homework sheets for all of my clients. And then, I have them all on my Remarkable or iPad or paper, whatever works for you. But we get them all out there. And then I'm writing as I'm meeting prep, not things I'm going to remember, things I know I'm not going to remember. Oh, they're turning 62 and their supplement stops. Oh, we got to apply for Medicare. Oh, we got to do these things right. I'm physically writing, even though it's in my dictation. I don't bring my dictation into the client meeting. I bring my homework sheet into the client meeting. So I'm physically writing things on there to make sure I'm prepped. And I'm doing that the Friday the week before. That means on Wednesday, the next week, I get to pull up that homework sheet and I'm like, oh, yep, look, I got to review cash flow. Yep. Oh, yeah, man, I'm glad I wrote that note down, right? And now I'm prepared for this meeting because I'm doing it at the time.
Like, I have a question for you before we get to action items. I don't know the answer to this as everyone's hearing this live. What are the very last words you say in your dictation? So you get to the very end of the dictation, right before you hit it off, what's the very last thing? Is there something you say every time?
If there's a letter to go out or not to go out, that's the very last thing.
And then you just hit end?
Yep.
I end every single memo with end of memo, thank you very much. And it's a callback from when we used to do it on cassette tapes. This is reflecting my age. Because it used to be, now it's on rev.com or CopyTalk or whatever.
Right.
And so someone had to sit in the office and type them up. And so you had to indicate when one memo ended and when the other one began. And it's just, because like one day Colleen, she's like, why do you end all your memos with end of memo, thank you very much? Because it's obviously the end of the memo. It's its own file.
Right.
I've just an old habit.
I don't know. It just comes out. I can't finish it until I say that.
I can't hit the stop button until I've said that. Well, so that's a blast from the past aside, Micah. Let's end this memo. Let's end this dictation with action items for this podcast. And so I would say action item number 1, and you know who does this best is one of our Invictus members, Todd Lester, great financial advisor, good friend. He has on the back of his cell phone written out his dictation template so that as soon as he hits record on his cell phone for the dictation, he turns his phone over. He's following that template. You have to have that template. Now, at some point, it will become a habit and you won't need it anymore, in which case you still need it. So have a template that you're following so that every memo or dictation is done consistently.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what Todd's thinking. He's like, oh, once I remember this, because he's been doing this for 30 years, I'll peel this off the back of my phone. Or he's like, you know what, this works really well. I'm just going to keep doing it. It's one of the two.
It's one of the two, yeah.
Action item number 2 is get all of your freaking work done before you leave the day, right? Make your schedule however it needs to be set up in Surge that allows you to do that. That's a really important thing, either the pre and the post as well on that meeting side. What does your schedule need to be? Everyone can do at least 4 meetings a day and get all of their work done, right? It's totally doable. You want to do more than that? Great. Really think about that, because you end up going to shoot yourself in the foot later on.
Yeah, and we can do a whole episode of this because a lot of us are not reliable for going back into the CRM and taking care of our own action items. And it sets a bad precedence for the team, and it sets a terrible precedence for the client of you said you were going to do something and you didn't get it done, which is so much worse. If you're not going to get it done, don't say you're going to do it. All right, action item number 3. If you really want to up-level the game, Micah, we're always looking at this. Do you want to kind of just do okay? Do you want to up-level? You really want to up-level, go pull your last 10 dictations and see if they meet your template. That's if you really want to up-level, right? Go back and look at those and say, is this in fact? And then trace it through to the CRM. If I said action item ABC, did that get put in the CRM? Are there notes that it was done correctly? Can I see that process that it was followed all the way through? Most advisors, by the way, won't do that. It takes some real courage. It will transform your practice. So
not in the CRM. It didn't happen. That's our rule.
It did not happen. Well, thank you all for our listeners for being here with us. We really enjoy doing these. We appreciate these. Feel free to reach out to Lifestyle at the Perfect RIA. And of course, give the podcast 5 stars. Even if you've done it already, vote early, vote often. That helps us spread the word that to an ever-growing audience.
I was going to make a joke about presidential voting, but now I'd go to jail for that. So I'll skip that one. Yes, but vote early, vote often on our podcast. Thank you guys so much. And until next time, happy planning.
Hey, before you leave, a quick word from our sponsors. Hey, everybody, I want you to take a quick look around your office, and on your desk, there should be the Retirement Tax Services Desktop Tax Guide. And if it's not there, or if it's not current, meaning you didn't download it in the last month, go to retirementtaxservices.com and download the Desktop Tax Guide. This is a must-have resource for every financial advisor committed to tax planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't